Welcome back to another episode of We Got Your Mac. This episode is kindly sponsored by Otter Business. This week, I've got Michael back in the studio with me. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Victoria, how are you?
I'm all good. I'm looking forward to this episode. We've got another update from Tom on our ongoing project where we're going to be talking about security. And then you and I had a really interesting chat with Ruva, didn't we? Who is the person responsible for AI PCs here at SHI.
Oh, we certainly did. And what did we learn? So much tidbits of information from her.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be really exciting. So guess we don't want to give too much away about that before we start. So let's start off with the chat with Tom, and we'll come back and talk about what we learned from it all later.
Sounds good.
Hi, Tom. Welcome back. We're looking forward to another update on your project.
Hi, Victoria. It's great to be back. We are moving along pretty steadily. Last episode, we talked about some problems we ran into and some simple tools that we use to overcome them. And now we're talking really about getting those devices in the user's hands and making sure they're able to use them, but also that they're secure enough so that the company feels confident that their data is protected through their day-to-day.
So I understand one of the fairly unusual problems you have to deal with from security here is actually you've got shared mobile devices, and you need to, obviously, for compliance purposes, you need to know who's using them, and it's in the user's interest as well to know that whoever was doing something naughty on the device was not the one person who is supposed to own that device, but is actually the person who was using it at the time.
Right, that's correct. So, last episode we talked about getting those shared devices connected to the network in an easy manner, so that no matter who's using them, they can connect to the network without exchanging passwords and things like that. Now we're talking exactly about not only identifying who's using the device, which we've done by mapping this to an identity provider. So to your point, we can see who's logging in and who's using the device at any given time. Because it's a shared device, we want the experience to be tailored to shared users, not individual users. So we have to have security that works for everybody, security that's transferable no matter who's logging on based upon their role within the organization. So we want the appropriate users to get the appropriate permissions, or in the case of the mobile devices, the appropriate apps that they're using. Obviously we don't want, we're talking about a retail customer. We don't want necessarily our store employees getting access to any, financial or HR data that back office users might be using.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Now, you talked about requiring passwords to be used, but what about biometrics? I mean, the whole point about all of these lovely new devices that we have is that you can use biometrics to access them. And surely that's a more secure way of identifying people, because you can't steal people's biometric identity. I don't think we want to go into how you would do that.
Right. No, and then we are moving to a passwordless world, and that definitely is the future. However, we still have to operate within the limitations that we're given currently. So on iOS devices, specifically iPads, where we're talking about Touch ID, and those store employees use them, we have a maximum of 5 fingerprints that can be used at any given time. So for shift workers, and for iPads that may be shared, not even shared within a department, but maybe shared within a store. So you have an entire store may be able to go to a back office, pick up an iPad, take it out onto the floor, and use as a POS system. Having that 5 fingerprint limit really would be prohibitive to their day-to-day. And we definitely don't want to get into the world where we're forcing 5 employees to use the same iPad at any given time, because that severely limits our redundancy and the ability for workers just to grab an iPad and get right to work. So we are still stuck with passcodes.
And can those passcodes be an employee's passcode would work on any of those devices?
Yeah, in most cases, depending upon how you set up the shared iPad, you can map your iPad to your identity provider and then use the same password that they would use for their other systems as well. So a single sign-on experience.
Okay, so they don't have to go, okay, which of these 20 iPads have I got? Let me get my list of passwords out. It's linked to their identity so that whichever device they go to in the organization, they log in, they get what they need to do their job.
Correct. And what we've done in some cases too, the shared iPads do come with limitations as well. Shared iPads require that the employee's data is downloaded to the iPad each time. So we don't want to get into a situation where we're just handing out iPads to whomever picks one up, because that way the employees would still be waiting for their specific user environment to download. So in most cases, we've tied the identity credentials just to the specific apps that they're using. So they could sign in just like you would sign into a cash register with your employee ID at a store. The iPad itself only has access to that point of sale app. So we've abstracted that layer away of access to the iPad and just made them sign on to the point of sale app that they're using. This way, we don't have to worry essentially about device security. That's locked down as well too. They don't have access to things they shouldn't have on the device. But if the device gets lost or stolen, we can just wipe it, not worry about it. There's no employee information on the device. Point of sale app cannot be accessed without an employee's credentials. So going back to your point before about tracking who's doing what, all that now is tracked within that point of sale app to say, okay, who's used. Did the employee sign on at this point in time? Did they sign out correctly? Was there a transaction that might have been in doubt? Who made that transaction? And we can see all that through their unique identity, and somewhat abstracting that layer of device security, relegated just to the MDM, and focus really on the app data that we really want to protect for those shift workers.
Yeah, because you're mentioning payments there, and obviously if they're dealing with payments, it's not just security, it's regulatory compliance as well that they're having to deal with PCI for card payments and things like that. So that's a whole nother set of considerations that you've had to work around.
True, and we want to focus on those standards, and companies have their own compliance standards as well. We talk about security, but we also talk about compliance, which is somewhat inherently different from security. Security is at those baseline standards indicating that the device is protected, whereas compliance is what are you allowed to do within the organization based upon the device's current state. So in other words, we may not want to allow access to certain resources if the device isn't running the current OS or if it's not on the corporate network. So by integrating the MDM's capabilities of determining the device's state and then proving that compliance to other network resources, we can make sure that only compliant devices access the network or have access to the point of sale app, and so forth. So there's a good balance between security and compliance, and as you talked about, meeting those other standards that are required within the industry. And that also allows us to really keep the device security focused from the MDM on what the employee needs to do their job and make it usable. So an employee can pick up a device without a heavy burden, and knowing that the IT staff didn't have to go out and touch every single device. We just push out the configuration profiles and settings that we need from the MDM, and we get instant security and compliance on the device.
No, I think it's really important because it's really easy to kind of aim for perfect security, and most of us know there is no such thing. But a lot of organizations tend to, if they're very risk averse, they will push the security to the point at which usability is compromised. And therefore, it's very hard for employees to have a great experience and in turn to give customers a great experience. So it sounds like a lot of thought has gone into actually understanding the different roles that people have and building a solution that really is an enabling solution and that is balancing that risk and usability in a sensible way.
Right, and you hit a nail on the head with enabling, right? We want to enable the organization and their employees to do their jobs, and while being mindful of the risk that is inherent with their jobs. And one of the tools that we used to do that and complete a completely customizable solution was the macOS Security Compliance Project, focusing, we talked about before, on the back-end Office Macs that they're using for their employees. The macOS Security Compliance Project is a tooling set that was developed by Apple, an automation tooling that was developed by Apple and other industry-leading security experts that really identifies what security baseline you'd like your company to adhere to, while also providing that level of customization within that baseline. One of the great things about this project is that once you define the baselines or the standards that you want to meet, is that it will print out all the scripts, all the MDM configuration profiles, and all the guidance that you need to implement these standards, and you just upload them to your MDM solution and go. And a great thing for the organization as well is it provides audit reports for this. So all those audit documents that every organization loves filling out and spending hours going over with their auditors can be generated in a matter of minutes as opposed to hours or days.
Yeah, well, that alone sounds like a massive relief. Always used to, in a previous role, always used to be my least favorite time of the year when the auditors came in, and it was always a fairly onerous process. I mean, it's there for the right reason, but that sounds like it makes things easier not only for the organization but for the auditors as well, because they will know that they've got good quality data. And that it's been generated from the system. There's not the room for human error there that there would be otherwise.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head again with the word data, right? Everybody loves data. I have a colleague who likes to say, data rules everything around me. And it's true, because with data, you can inherently prove that you are compliant, you are adhering to these standards, or even events in your environment have occurred or have not occurred. That, I think, is the key too, is people who want to be security conscious and risk adverse want to know as much that did an event not occur if there's a current security threat on the landscape. And you can, with good data, you can say, here are the security controls I have in place. Here are the logs from my endpoints that show that these security controls did their job, and this potential security threat did not impact our organization. And you can be confident in that with that data.
That's also important, even if there is a security incident, because certainly what has happened in the EU with some of the rulings, what they look at is, did you put enough effort into making sure you could prevent it? They understand that you can't prevent everything. But if you're deemed to have put enough effort in, then actually you're found not to be at fault. And the focus is on, are you doing the right thing? So if you didn't put the effort in, then you're fine. So this is, from the Information Commissioner, this is on the privacy side of things. But actually, if you did everything and that you should have done, then they will be much more lenient. So I think having that data to prove that you had done what you needed to is really important. So that sounds like a really interesting project, and something that I think our listeners might want to investigate further and think about taking advantage of. Okay, well, that sounds like you're making a significant amount of progress here. So we look forward to hearing from you in a few weeks with the next update.
Sounds great. Look forward to coming back.
Otter Business presents solutions for Apple. Achiever Series Folio ST for iPad 10th Gen has a built-in adapter for simultaneous listening and charging, as well as a clear asset tag window for easy traceability. Defender Series with kickstand and hand strap is built with a durable design to protect tech investments and has adjustable hand straps for easy carrying and viewing. Otter Business has a solution built for your every need.
Okay, Michael, so we've got an exciting conversation coming up now.
All right. Looking forward to it.
We all know there's been a lot of buzz about AI PCs, and we really want to know what's real about it and what's just marketing. So we've invited along our colleague Ruva, who is based in our Austin office. She's going to talk to us about AI PCs. Now, Ruva, do you want to explain to us why you are the person to tell us all about AI PCs?
Yes, I would love to. First things first, hello, I'm Ruva. I am the business development manager here at SHI that supports all of our AI PC business. So that is anything Intel, AMD, Qualcomm, Snapdragon, anything AI PC. I am the person that is the point of contact. I work with all of our OEMs to make sure that our sellers and our customers have the resources that they need to be able to understand AI PCs, their specific brand of AI PC, and how it can actually impact their business in a positive way. And so that's what I do. I've gotten a couple certifications in AI, one from Microsoft, and it is just a subject that I'm very interested in. I also decided to go to grad school for a master's in information systems with a hope to focus in AI specifically. So this is why I'm here and am able to talk to it a little bit.
Right. Well, we will definitely be testing your knowledge. It's great to have you here. So the first thing that I've noticed is as I read around the subject, everyone seems to have a different definition of AI PCs. All the analysts that I read stuff from, all the vendors, because they want theirs to be the AI PC. Can you kind of expand on some of these definitions we're hearing and also explain how they differ from a traditional PC?
Yeah, of course. Happy to. So with AI PCs, it is that, hey, they have a neural processing unit, which is the NPU, in addition to the CPU and the GPU.
While we're on the subject of TLAs, CPU and GPU, because we use those terms without thinking about them.
Yes. So for the CPU, it is that central processing unit. And then for the GPU, it's the graphics processing unit. All of our devices have this. The AI PC just has that NPU on top of that. The NPU is a neural processing unit. It is a low power processor that is able to execute computations at a very fast rate. And so that is measured in TOPS. TOPS, which is trillions of operations per second. So how we got to trillions of operations per second, I don't know, but we're here. And so the AI PC alone does not have a minimum TOPS on it. It hasn't had like, hey, it has to have X amount of TOPS to be considered an AI PC. It is, hey, it has an NPU, the CPU, and the GPU. Now, there are in that branch of AI PCs, there are Copilot PCs. And I like to say all Copilot PCs are AI PCs, but not all AI PCs are Copilot PCs. Copilot Plus PCs have higher recommendations. So they're going to have that minimum 16 gigs of RAM, minimum storage of 256 gigs of storage, as well as a NPU that performs at a minimum of 40 TOPS. And so that is where that definition that we have right now that we're sticking to.
So, Ruva, I have a question for you. If we can already use AI on PCs without the NPU, what are the benefits of actually having an NPU?
That is a great question. And I think you're not the only person that has that question. Yes, our devices right now are functioning perfectly okay without having that NPU. So the NPU kind of offloads the tax on the CPU and the GPU, which allows our devices to last a lot longer in terms of the battery, but also performance-wise. So when we're not tasking the GPU and the CPU with our background blur, our live captions, our noise cancellation, you are able to then have your device perform at a higher level for a much longer period of time.
Okay, so I know, we've had a lot of conversations outside of this, outside the podcast, which is one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you. And we've talked about the fact, the hardware at the moment is really ahead of the software. And so we don't really know, because people are still working on it, how actually demanding that software is going to be, because it's all still full of possibility and full of potential, and people are still developing it. So it seems in many ways that actually, apart from the NPU, the bar's been set quite low particularly for memory for some of these devices. Do you think that those recommended specs might be quite low, considering we don't have that much AI software yet, and we don't know what the demand is going to be in terms of data storage and other processing outside of the NPU?
That is a very interesting point that you bring up, that it does seem that the spec recommendations have been placed a little bit lower. So when we're thinking about these devices, it's important to think about the different personas and the types of applications that they may be using on their day-to-day basis, right? So someone in admin may not be using the same amount of memory as maybe a developer or somebody that's in sales that has to have multiple applications open at one time. And so as we think about that, and we've also seen here at SHI that we are seeing a lot more customized orders, that people are speccing a lot higher. And we believe that that is to make up for the task that's been put on the CPU and the GPU, where the NPU is going to come in and solve that because it's going to take on that workload rather than it being tasked to just the memory and the CPU.
Okay, so that's quite a difficult balance for people to try and work out then, isn't it?
Yes, and that's where like we kind of come in terms of helping spec out the right devices and working with different silicon partners and OEM partners. We believe that the AI developers are working to optimize the space that's already there, right? So if they're going to work on a 16 gig device, they're going to optimize the applications that they create to make sure that that 16 gigs is going to perform at a high and optimal level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess as well, we're hearing a lot of discussions about how much of the workload is going to be happening in the cloud. I mean, we don't know, but that's an option too, I suppose.
Yes. So with cloud computing, a lot of the AI processing is going to be offloaded into the cloud. This means that the local machine does not need to be as powerful and do a lot of the heavy lifting as it will be done on those remote servers.
Well, since this is We Got Your Mac, let's talk a little bit about Apple. I think it's appropriate, right? Apple has been including NPUs in at least some of their processors since the iPhone X in 2017, which was one of my favorite phones, by the way, for machine learning processes. But they haven't put such an emphasis on specs. The base level MacBook Air still has 8 gigs of RAM. Do you think that Apple has shot themselves in the foot by keeping 8 gigs as the standard, considering all of the upcoming AI capabilities?
That is a very valid concern that a lot of people have, especially with the increasing AI application demands. And so there are a few things that we can consider right now, right? So there's optimization, their key and target audience, the unified memory architecture that Mac has, as well as future proofing. So when it comes to optimization, we know that Apple is known for optimizing their software and making sure that it works efficiently with the hardware. So with the M1 and M2 chips on the MacBook Air, they're designed to handle those tasks efficiently, which can mitigate the limitations that 8 gigs of RAM can put. And then the next thing is their target audience, or what we can perceive as their target audience is that general consumers, students, or professionals that may not need heavy AI, but they have the ability to use it. And so for the more demanding tasks, Apple offers higher end models in their MacBook Pros. And then for the future proofing, while 8 gigs does seem very, very, very low, it can be sufficient for their, like the base user need. Is it the most optimal in the world? No, just based on what we're seeing and the different applications that people use. But again, if we're looking at the general consumer, students, or professionals that may not need these heavy AI workloads, it will do. It will do. But would I recommend higher? Yes.
Thank you so much, Ruva. That's been really interesting. I know Michael and I have learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners will have done as well. We really appreciate you joining us, and I'm sure you're going to be kept very, very busy in your role with all the interest that we're seeing in AI PCs.
Thank you for having me.
So that was a couple of really fun updates that we got there, then, wasn't it, Michael? I know you didn't join me for the conversation with Tom, but I mean, I found that really interesting. What were your key takeaways from that one?
There were just so many. The fact that his project is progressing from tackling initial issues to focusing on deploying devices to users while ensuring the robust security, that's a major feat, right? So other takeaways for me were like the shared mobile devices discussion, where Tom spoke on the challenges associated with shared mobile devices, particularly the need for the compliance and tracking the user activity, and how they were able to implement identity providers to map and identify users logging into the shared devices, because that's obviously a problem for IT teams, right? Who's logging into the network, right?
Yeah, I want to know that if I'm sharing a device, that I'm not going to be held responsible for what somebody else does on it. So I think it's important as a user as well. They're making clear that balance between security and usability, because I'm sure we've all worked in places where things are locked down so much you're sitting there tearing your hair out because the security means you can't do your job kind of thing. So that was interesting. And I thought the other thing that was really interesting was that macOS security compliance project, the fact that there is something that they're addressing compliance. Security obviously is always incredibly important. And I know that we've got a blog post on the website that sits alongside this episode, and there's more about that macOS security compliance project in that blog post. So if anybody who's listening wants to find out more, then go and have a look at wegotyourmac.com, read the blog post, follow the links. There'll be plenty of information there, particularly if you want to know how to use that project to help you generate those audit reports quickly and get you through the pain of the audit with rather fewer stresses than normal. So we then went and we talked to Ruva. Now, she's recently taken on this role at SHI, looking at working with our customers specifically around AI PC. She's now dedicated into that role. And I thought it was interesting to talk about how early we are really in the life of those AI PCs. They're very new into the market. Do you reckon it's worth upgrading to an AI PC at the moment?
Well, I tend to play on the ladder of being an early adopter of technology. So I would be heads in to be one of the first, because I like to play around, tinker, and try to basically break it at the end of the day, see how I can use it. And so, yeah, I would definitely like to dive in.
It was interesting that she actually talked us through the things that are already happening that can shift to the NPU. And this is stuff that happens every day. We spend our whole time on conference calls, right? And actually all of the stuff we depend on with the noise cancellation, the background blur, the transcription, the fact that can move to NPU sounds like a really good idea. Elsewhere, I'm hearing a lot about, there's this, the developers need the hardware available to be able to develop the software, but people don't want to buy the hardware until the software's developed for it. So it's a little bit chicken and egg at the moment. So it's people like you and IT departments who are thinking like you, maybe, who are going to be going down the route of shifting to AI PCs at the moment. Well, I think we've had a really good lot of discussions today. We'd like to thank Otter Business for their support of this episode. Do be sure to visit wegotyourmac.com to read our blog post and find other resources for this and all of our previous episodes.
That's right. Like, follow, and share. And we'll see you on the next episode.